Your host today will be myself, Francesco Scartosi, and Wayne Andrews, and we'll be walking through the topic that you've all shown a tremendous amount of interest in, which is understanding H.264. And the way I've designed this presentation is the best way, I believe, to get this information across is that I want to explain the pain. I want for you to feel and understand the technology and the pain that is associated with it, and how it affects you as creative professionals, and why it's actually, in some cases, inhibiting you from what you want to do primarily day in, day out, which is create content. The other thing that I would like to explain, and I think will lead to a better understanding of H.264, is an explanation of the markets and the trends themselves. And understanding the trends, you'd actually get a good feeling of why the trends are affecting you as a creative professional, why you should keep your eye on them. And finally, we're going to go through the solution. So understanding H.264 is great. Understanding how it's inhibiting your creative process is great. However, if there's no solution, then what's the point of really understanding it? And I'm here to basically talk to you guys about the H.264 technology and also introduce to you a solution that gets you over that hump. So, in order to frame the discussion and for you to understand why the actual Matrox is taking a leading role as a hardware manufacturer in this topic, you have to understand where we're coming from. So, Matrox primarily is a hardware manufacturer, and we do create hardware for creative professionals. And what we do on a daily basis is that we basically look at the editing process, and we ask ourselves and we put ourselves in your position and try to really understand where the holes are and where the bottlenecks are that are really coming between you and your passion, create messages and stories and content. Well, you could pretty much chop up the editing process, I believe, into four basic chunks. Input, where you basically ingest your material from your preferred camera of source. Edit with your preferred editing platform of choice, whether it be Final Cut, Adobe, CS5, or Media Composer 5. And then you output. And you output whether it be for the final project, or most likely you want to make sure that you're outputting and making sure that you actually take a look at your video as you're creating it, while you're creating it, so you're ensured that it will look like the video that is being delivered to your customer. And finally, the delivery process, which is basically, changing over the years. And especially now, you'll notice that the delivery process there, I'm showing web, an iPad, iPhone, and a Blu-ray device. Or effectively, what we're showing you there is that a little glimpse of the trend that I'm going to be talking about a little later. So as a hardware manufacturer, we pretty much cover, just like everyone else, the input and output. And yes, competition varies between price and features on the inputs and outputs, but by far, the hardware manufacturers there are pretty much covering the in and out. And Matrox, with its competition, once again, have that very well covered. Now, the one place and why Matrox is taking a leading role in this particular subject is because we focus on delivery. This is the part that makes us shine. We have added not only the input-output capability of our devices, but we've also added the capability to deliver. And you'll understand why. Because the delivery process has to be, if not today, will be very shortly part of your editing process when you deliver. And I'll talk to you about this today, and we're going to be focusing on this last chunk of delivery. Now, let's jump into understanding the pain. I fully believe that the only way to really understand the pain is to really get a little brief history lesson on where we came from. And you take a look at the editing process today. There's many different codecs, and there's a reason for that. Our industry hasn't really standardized on any one format for the editing codec. So you can choose your camera of choice. Depending on the project you're working for, the job you're working on, you're going to probably use many or all of these formats throughout your creative life. And there's many different codecs out there, and it really made the editing partners out there, Adobe, Apple and Avid basically try to figure out how to handle all these codecs for you. And one of the things you see here, ProRes, is indicated as one as an intermediate codec to try to get, no matter what you're ingesting into that. We also have one at Matrox with Matrox MPEG-2 HD codec, very high quality codec for an intermediate. But this is not the point here. Is that we start with many different codecs, and we really never really standardized on any. And editing, most likely you went, after your editing process, you went to deliver to a DVD. And for all of you that have delivered to DVD, you know that creating that DVD content was excruciating. It was worse than looking at paint dry. Where I'm going with this is that today, the center of this wheel is basically changing. And it's H.264. It comes in different names, MPEG-4, AVC. It all means the same thing. It's H.264. And if you thought DVD was actually very heavy or very hard to deliver to, well, H.264 just made your life a lot more painful. Okay? Now, let's get into it. Everyone knows that the most efficient path between 2 points is a straight line, right? Well, we'd all love to take that straight line. We'd all love to create our project, love to just export it to H.264 and deliver it to our client. Well, the reality is it never happens that way, because of the fact that before you ever deliver to your client, you have to tweak that video because you weren't happy with the quality of the image or something went wrong with a graphic. So what happens there is basically you have to re-export to H.264, and understanding the pain of H.264 encoding, what happens is you basically just ate up a lot of your time. And as a creative professional, you all know how precious your time is. So after you're doing it once, you think you're done, you look at it, you're not done because you basically have seen something else. And you're going to tweak some more. And you're going to re-export and re-export. I think you get the picture. Effectively, you're wasting a lot of time and a very heavy process of exporting to H.264. So a lot of you might feel that you're on a never-ending journey. And I'm sure all of you are asking yourselves at this point, well, if you're telling me it's so painful, why tweak? Well, the main reason why you're going to have to tweak is because how do you think you'll be judged? Do you think your customer is going to judge you on your story, on the message that you're trying to portray? Or will they be focusing on that blocky image and never really get what you're on? How many times have I heard from creative professionals saying, you know, I sent my job to my client and he couldn't get past that blocky image, and I had to basically, before I portray my story to him, I had to basically redo my work. I want you to pay attention to these two images. The one on the left and the one on the right, pretty much to the naked eye and first glance, they pretty much look very similar. Well, how will you be judged? If this was a jeans commercial and you'll hand in one of these, which one would you hand in to your client? I'm going to point your attention to the jeans specifically. Let me just go back one. If you take a look at the one on the left, you'll see that there's a lot of blocky a lot of blocks around her jeans. In fact, there's even worse than that in this image. You take a look at this here, which looks like part of the pile of leaves. In fact, you'll see on the right-hand side, it's her hand. And finally, the background image, you'll see that the details of the girl sitting in the background is hardly visible, where on the one on the right, you can actually see it clearly. And that's what I mean by you have to pay attention to this, because I believe a lot of you, in the rush of getting your job out, might want to sacrifice quality for time because it's just very heavy, output H.264. And I'm here to say, I've heard it time and time again, that you'll be judged on the quality before you ever been judged on the content and the story you're trying to tell. So that's the pain that we're really facing today. Now, let's talk about the trends a little bit. Well, the world has actually changed quite a lot. It's not our grandfather's world where we basically all huddled up on one television and consumed our media from that one television. Well, the reality is today we have many different ways of consuming media. In fact, they're changing quite rapidly. Just take a look at the Blu-ray player sales. They are up 76% from 2008 to 2009, okay, up to 70 million in 2009. The projected sales for 2010 is, 30 million. What's astonishing about this statistic is when I was researching for this webinar, one thing really hit home in terms of understanding how important this trend is. During the first 5 weeks, or the 5 weeks of the holiday shopping season this past winter, Blu-ray player sales were up 44%. Okay, and this is during, while the overall consumer spending was down 1%. I want to stop here for a second and really make sure that the conclusion of that stat is understood. Even during the worst economic time in the U.S. history, you just can't keep this trend from growing. And you're sitting there probably thinking, so what? Why do I have to care about this trend? It's because of the fact that this is affecting your delivery process as a creative professional. And Blu-ray is one of the places you're going to be delivering to. The next one is Blu-ray media sales is also one indicative stat that is going to be proving that this is just going to grow. This past Q1 in 2010, the sales of Blu-ray media were 331 million. Over 12% of packaged media was Blu-ray. And that just tells you where we're going and how we're consuming our media. Mobile devices. I challenge anyone to walk anywhere and see, not fall, bump into someone that doesn't have an iPhone, a PSP, an iPod, and consuming actual video from there. It's because of the fact that this is how your client wants to either review your job or watch the final project, whether it be a producer or whether it be a bride wanting to see her video on her iPhone. And the web. This is another trend that we can't ignore. Whether it be video that you're seeing on YouTube, Hulu, Vimeo, it is something and a very valid screen to consume your video. In fact, we as creative professionals have to take care or have to watch out for the three screens, whether it be the mobile, television, or the web. And YouTube views are up 50% from 2009. 173 million views per month. That just tells you that people are becoming accustomed to watching their video on the web. And the images on the right-hand side also show that the news is being consumed quite heavily, whether it be CNN, BBC, or the National here in Canada. In fact, by 2014, over 91% of all global consumer online traffic will be video. And that is basically another reason why you should all pay attention to these trends. Because at the end of it all, they all have effectively one common denominator. H.264. This is basically one of the features, or one of the formats rather, that have been adopted quite widely over the different media consuming. In preparation for this webinar, we've asked the registrants to actually add their comments or questions, and a lot of questions came in about how does H.264 tie into HTML5. Well, bottom line is H.264, even though HTML5 doesn't have one standard video codec that of how you can actually put video on a web page, but H.264 is not only a very valid format for HTML5, but it's actually the one that spans all the different medium. That's why we're seeing it being adopted by everybody, whether they're producing it for the web or mobile devices. Okay? At this point, I'd like to just add some interactivity to the presentation and ask you guys to join me in a poll. I'd like to understand what you're delivering today. So I'm going to ask you to make a choice, whether Blu-ray, web, SD, DVD, or tape. I'm going to open the poll now, and I'm going to wait for the classic 80% of respondents before broadcasting the results. Wayne, any guesses while we wait for people to vote on what the most popular format will be or is as they're delivering?
I would say web, but I would be also not surprised to see.
Still strong.
Yeah, it's still strong factor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely it would resonate with what I'm hearing in the field out there.
But with your Ray, the transition from happened like almost overnight. Imagine you've shot high def, you've edited high def, now you want to deliver high def. Blu-ray is the way to go, or
in fact, you make a good point with regards to Blu-ray. It basically might not be as popular in terms of what our creative professionals are actually delivering to, because for a little known fact maybe that not a lot of people know, that you can actually put HD material or Blu-ray rather on a DVD. So
you mean H.264?
H.264, right? Rather,
yeah, you can use that. It's a cost-effective medium or media for delivering HD. You don't have to go out and, if you had like a 20-minute H.264 high-def file, you can author that on a standard DVD media and then play that back on a Blu-ray player. Maybe
that's a topic for another webinar. But let's close the poll and just broadcast the results and show everyone what you're voting on. So by far the web, with 56% of the people online on the webinar, really showing that the web is the most popular. And like you said, Wayne, SD DVD seems to be still quite strong. Tape, wow, it's still taking 6%, which is surprising. And Blu-ray, at least it's basically edging out tape, and it's 7%. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lot of questions around Blu-ray and actually delivering it in what medium, expensive, licensing, and all that. But maybe, like I said, another topic for another webinar. So let me just thank you all for responding to the poll and continue with our presentation here. So, let's jump into what the nitty-gritty details of H.264. What is it really? Well, fundamentally, like I said, you hear it being called by different names, AVC HD, MPEG-4. It basically all means the same thing. It's a very sophisticated encoding algorithm. It was created so that you can actually maintain the highest quality HD video, compressed HD video with the smallest footprint. That's the bottom line, and that's why they needed to invent such a very mathematically intelligent, sophisticated encoding algorithm, and that's the result. Like I said, it basically delivers stunning quality at very low bit rates, and we'll talk about exactly what that is, and you'll get a good understanding of why it's ideal for web and mobile devices. And why it's the codec that Blu-ray has been basically defaulted to. So anybody that's taking a look at Blu-ray have to worry about H.264. So let's jump into the technical part of the presentation and understand H.264 in its essence. Now you'll hear terms in H.264 like long GOP and IBP. Well, these might be scary, but you chop it all down, it's very basic, very easy. GOP just means a group of pictures. And IBP, I'll explain, is basically a way to differentiate the frames, I'll say. And in fact, I is in fact an intra-coded frame, or sometimes called an index frame. It's a reference frame fundamentally, which contains all of the information that your video has in that particular frame. A B frame is referred to or is known as a bidirectional frame, and all it does is it takes or keeps the information from the frames before and after, the index frame and the next frame. So it's really only storing the difference between what come before and what's coming after. And the P frame is known as a predictive frame, and basically it's taking or only storing the information from the preceding frame. So these two strips that you see here, obviously the top one, which is all I frame, is quite heavy because every frame contains every bit of information throughout your video. Whereas the lower strip is less heavy because it's really more intelligent and it's storing the information, in this case, every 2 frames, you're basically reinserting an index frame, and you're only storing the differences between. To better understand that, I've prepared a graphic here, and this is basically indicative of an MPEG-2 encoding with, in here you have a 15-frame group of pictures, so between index frames, you have 15 B and P frames. And what I would like for you to take point to is this image of the little boy walking through the forest on this path. I want you to picture the video of a camera that's fixed just behind him as we start him walking down the path. Everything else does not change except the little boy walking down the path. So why would you store all that information on the trees and the path and the leaves when really all you really want to keep the quality is on what is changing? And what makes H.264 even more intelligent and sophisticated than MPEG-2 is that you need to store a lot less information to keep the quality. In fact, I think it's you know, at 20 megabits per second of an H.264 is equivalent of the same file being coded in MPEG-2 at 40 megabits per second. Double the is that right, Wayne? Yeah, exactly. So basically, it's basically storing less information, HD, so that you can actually get away with a lot more quality. Now, you'll hear other terms and terminology like profiles. There's two profiles you have to really pay attention to: baseline profile and main profile. I'll start by talking about the baseline profile. And this is where it's a baseline profile is IP GOP structure, so it's not as sophisticated as the IBP, or efficient, I should say. It's CAV-LC, and that is another scary term, but at the end of the day, you break it down, it means context adaptive variable length coding. You don't have to remember that. All that really means is that, you know, this is the simpler profile where, you know, it's high quality and it's easier to decode. And the reason why it's easier to decode and it's CAV-LC is so that iPods typically or mobile devices could play it back without any heavy lifting, really. Then you have main profile, where this is an IBP GOP structure, a little more sophisticated, and that's CABAC encoding. CABAC, again, scary term. All you have to remember is it means, well, you don't have to remember what it means. It's context adaptive binary arithmetic coding. It sounds heavier, and it is. It's higher quality, harder to decode, and usually you need hardware to encode it. And this is basically the format that Blu-ray has adopted and Hollywood has adopted at 35 megabits per second. So that's basically some of the terminology you'll hear around H.264. Now, I started by saying the one thing you're going to take away to H.264, it's the highest quality codec at the smallest footprint. I gave you an example of, for example, if you had a 66 gigabyte file, uncompressed HD file on your hard disk, and you would encode that as ProRes 422 in high quality, you basically, the resultant would be a good-looking video at 6 gigabytes per second. That's and it would only take 6 gigabytes per second on your hard disk. If you do the same on H.264 and encode at 20 megabits per second, you basically result in a 1 gigabyte file. So it's 1/66th basically of an uncompressed HD. So you can get the idea here that it's a high quality codec that leaves the smallest footprint. And that's why all of the devices we talked about earlier were fundamentally using H.264 as a codec of choice. So I'm sure you're basically all, you know, thinking, okay, that's enough of the mumbo jumbo. Let me just jump into showing me the problem. And I want to show you that exact thing right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Compressor, because at this point, what I would like for you to think about, and like I framed the whole discussion, you finished your creative process and now it's time to deliver, okay? And I'm on a MacBook Pro right now, so, you know, that's primarily the demo. I know the audience is PC and Mac. I'll basically talk about the PC side and the rest of the presentation, but for the demo, I have my MacBook Pro running Compressor, okay? And fundamentally, what we start off, and like I want you to think about, is you're done. You're finished your creative process, and all you're doing now is you want to output this. So let's pretend we're going to output to an iPod. So I'm going to add a file. I'm going to pick this church file here. If you can't see it, I'll show you that the details of the file a little later. Now, I'm going to pick this church source file. Show you exactly what it was in a moment. I'm going to add that, and I'm going to go down here. Okay, and I'm going to just zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. At this point, you'll see that you have some settings to pick from, and you can pick from Apple or custom. Okay, I'll show you custom later, but right now, for those of you who are accustomed to using Compressor, you can pick Apple. And for this particular example, the full HD clip named Church that I picked the client would like to review it on his iPod. So effectively, I'm going to take this setting, okay, and I'm just going to simply drag and drop. These are presets in Compressor that make it easy for a creative professional to output to exactly what the client would like to see. So at this point here, I'm going to just drag and drop, which I did, and I'm going to rename this resultant video to, I'll call it CPU, and the reason why I'm doing that is I'm showing you that the CPU is actually going to be crunching away at this H.264 file, okay? And I'm going to submit that job, okay? I'm going to call that job CPU so we know what we're talking about, and I'm going to submit. So at this point, I want to go to the batch monitor and just show you what or how long it's going to be taking. So at this point, you'll see the batch monitor coming up, and I'm just going to focus your attention to this. Go into this computer, active jobs, and you'll see the CPU, which I've named. At this point, you see that there's 23 seconds. Let me just zoom in a little closer so you can see. This is the pain point that I've been talking about. Remember, this is a 30-second clip, and I'll show you the source in a second. And at this point, we've already wasted 33 seconds, and we're nowhere near the end of this process. Okay? And that is the point of this pain, really, is because of or showing you the problem. If this was a typical job, a 20-minute, an hour documentary, you've already wasted that time and more. In fact, now I'm at close to 60 seconds, so you've wasted double real time. So, that is basically, a lot of people that are feeling the pain of delivering to H.264, that is what they're feeling today. Now, let me just go for a second and show you the source. It's this clip right here. It's Church on my desktop. I'm going to get information so you can see it. And let me just zoom it out. And let me go into showing you the attributes of that source file. So as I said, it was a 1920 1080 Apple ProRes 422, and the duration is just 30 seconds. Okay, that is what I want you to focus on. This example was just a 30-second clip. So going back to Compressor for a second, and before we go and show you we'll continue with the presentation. Second. Okay, so as you can see here, we're 2 minutes and 2 seconds into the process, and once again, we haven't even reached the midway point. Okay, that's the problem. That is fundamentally what I want you to feel at this point. I'm obviously not going to wait for the rest. It's going to be extremely painful. So let's just leave that cooking in the background, and we'll come back to it in a second. Okay, so let's continue. Now that you've seen the problem, I want to once again open the interactivity and like to have you guys join in and tell me if you're waiting too long to create an H.264 file. Obviously, this is for the respondents that have, or those of you who are using H.264 as a delivery. So let me open the poll right now. And while we're waiting for my classic 80% respondents, any guesses, Wayne, on which one you think that nobody has a problem waiting, or do you think my example of pain is being felt out there?
No, I have to believe it's felt out there. Where you had 50% of the people delivering to web.
To the web, yes.
So if they're delivering H.264 or Flash for that matter, it's going to be painful unless they're all like little short 10-second, 30-second pieces. But if you're uploading or encoding long times, I would think you will feel the pain point already.
But even looking at YouTube taking 1080p video, I mean, even if you're going to the web, that would be extremely painful if you're delivering an H.264 1080p file. So I could imagine that people are feeling that pain. So especially, and the point about YouTube is the fact that people are accustomed to consuming that quality or level of quality. So looks like all of you have quickly answered. Let me just close the poll for a second and broadcast the results. Obviously, you can see that we got a lot of people saying that, only 7% of the respondents are saying, no, not an issue. Well, I was expecting that to be extremely low. In fact, I was hoping it to be 0%. But clearly,
that may be the tape people.
That's right. In fact, those numbers match almost to the point. So, yeah, so 40%, 47% of the people are significantly considering this a significant problem, and 46. So that's encouraging. It really means that we actually have found a real hole in the creative process here. So thanks for joining in that poll, and let me just continue here. Now, as I said, my little example that's crunching in the background, I have compressor, but a 30-second clip is not necessarily a realistic resultant. So let me talk about what our customers have actually told us what a realistic number would be. If a 20-minute project is on average what everyone does out there, if you would do that for an iPod and an 8-core Mac, it would take you close to 70, if not a little over 70 minutes to encode. If you're doing flash encoding on an 8-core Mac, for this 20-minute ProRes HD 1920 1080p clip, basically wait 60 minutes. And Blu-ray, again, 70 minutes. Now, I said, maybe not everyone's using Compressor. What are those results on a Telestream Episode? Well, in fact, on an iPod, on an 8-core Mac, same system, probably take close to 45, 50 minutes. Flash, definitely well into an hour, so more than real time. And if you're delivering with Telestream Episode a 1080p clip that would actually go to the web, I mean, you're well into 130s, even close to 140 minutes. So excruciating is the word I'm hearing from a lot of customers out there telling us that, the waiting for H.264 is just too painful. And if Adobe Media Encoder is the tool you're using to encode, well, we've also done those on a PC laptop with, looking at iPod. It takes you, 30 minutes to do about a 20-minute clip. Flash would take 70 minutes, and Blu-ray would be well into 120 minutes. So clearly, this is basically the pain point that we're feeling out there. Okay. So at this point, once again, I'm interested in hearing what applications you use. I published 3 of them that we typically hear our market using. But let me open the poll to you and ask you exactly what application do you use most to encode H.264. So go ahead, open up. And actually, at this point, Wayne, I think that most of the people that obviously we have PC and Mac people on the line. But wouldn't you say we've heard most often than not that those customers that actually consider themselves compressionists try to tend to use, or you see them using Episode more often than not, or is it something that, whether it be Compressor because it's more accessible, or Media Encoder because it's more accessible? How do you see that breaking down?
I think it's primarily first if it's like because of the way the softwares are bundled. So with Final Cut Studio, you get Apple Compressor. With Adobe Creative Suite, you get Adobe Media Encoder. Then you have the guys who are, let's say, maybe Avid. You get Sorensen. So I think the results will be based on the editor. But then you have the higher, let's say, with Episode Pro, there's even more controls and tweakability inside it. So some people have like Final Cut Studio, but then they go and buy Episode because they want that advanced UI and that. So the extra tools that you get and more encoding formats.
Okay. So good. Let me close the poll. It looks like we got our 80% respondents. So I'm going to close the poll and broadcast the results. And you're looking at the accessibility. It looks like Compressor and Adobe Media Encoder definitely are coming up above the Telestream Episode. And in fact, Sorensen Squeeze also has 13%. Episode is below that. So interesting to see that. Clearly, that indicates that the tool Compressor and Media Encoder, because of the fact that it's more accessible, people like to use that. So good, because in fact, with our solution, we'll show you how you can actually speed those up. So let me just thank you and move this poll over. So let's continue with our presentation. So before I show you the solution for a second, you know, I'm sure you're all thinking that this H.264, between them, the terminology and the time wasted, and the fact that, you know, it almost feels like you've been trained to waste time. You know, I'm sure you're looking for a way to come out of that maze, and we're here to offer one of those solutions. So let me go back and share this presentation with you. Results. So right here, basically, I'm going to zoom back in. Before I show you the solution, I want you to feel really the pain. And remember the thing that I was cooking in the background. I'll go to the completed jobs right here in this tab, and we see CPU, which was just done now. These that you see here are pretty much things that I was using earlier this morning to make sure that it all works. So I'm going to go to the Information tab, and that 30-second clip, zoom in so you can all see it. The time it took for that 30-second clip to actually encode in an iPod format, which is small, is 5 minutes and 29 seconds. Just imagine if that was any longer than 30 seconds. I mean, that's the pain. So before we go any further, I think at this point you're all ready to see what the solution is all about. So let me close the batch monitor. Let me delete setting. Let me just go back for a second and show you guys something. So I'm going to keep the source file that we focused on, that we basically looked at. It was a 1920 1080p ProRes 422 high quality clip, a 30-second clip. I'll keep that up there, and that's the job I want to send to my client. But this time, because in my demo, in the solution, I have a Matrox MAX, and I'll tell you in more detail what the MAX is all about. You'll find that because it's connected to this MacBook Pro that I'm running here, you'll find that it's part of the custom settings. And then you'll see the Matrox MAX H.264 settings right here. And if you open up that tab, you'll see that there's 3 sections: Blu-ray, fast encode, and high quality encode. In fact, these are all presets. I'll just show you for a second here exactly what I'm talking about. These are all presets that we've pre-canned, and we have plenty of them that you can take a look at, that we've prepared for you. If you're delivering in Blu-ray, or if you want to go fast encode, you have the Apple devices, just like Apple offers you. Apple iPad, the TV. Scroll here so you can see Apple TV, and you see all these presets that Matrox has done. This is basically for those of you who don't want to really tinker with all of those settings, and we've done a good job in basically preparing those all for you. Now, at this point, you choose between these 3 settings, and you'll notice there is Blu-ray, self-explanatory, fast encode, and high quality encode. The reason between these 2 settings is that we've actually done our job to give you 2 choices. A fast encode means just that. We basically use the heavy lifting of the hardware encoder to encode that. And the high quality means we're doing 2 things with our hardware. We're doing the high quality hardware encoding, and we're using our own scaler, not the QuickTime scaler, to ensure that you get better quality than just using your system single pass. So for an apples to apples comparison, no pun intended, I'm going to go to fast encode Apple devices. And if you remember in the example that I used for the CPU, I basically went to an iPod or iPhone video. So I'll go into this one. Go a little more so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to pick the 640-360 iPod video, and I'm going to drag and drop it into the settings. So I've searched the settings or the preset that I like. I'm going to drag and drop it, and I'm going to name this one so we all know what it is. I'll call it Matrox. Matrox MAX. Okay? And I'm going to submit this job. Call it Matrox MAX. Oops. MAX. And I'm going to submit this job. Okay, so let me just go to the batch monitor, see where I am. This computer, active. Let me zoom in here. And as you see, this is what I want you to focus on. At this point, that 30-second clip is almost already done. And effectively, I didn't even have enough time to go through my spiel. You guys already have that done. Any guesses on how long, Wayne? Not fair, you've seen this before. I'll basically show you how long it took. that same clip. Now, Matrox MAX is the one that I just did, and as you can see, we just did it now at 10:40 a.m. Information, it took 19 seconds right here. You can all focus on that. 19 seconds to do this 30-second clip. I mean, at this point, if you were in front of me, that's where I'd hear the wow, ooh. So don't be shy entering that in your chat box.
It says impressive.
Okay, good. So that is the solution. Effectively, we just accelerate.
Wow, wow.
Oh, we're getting that? Good, good. We're getting that. Very good. And I can hear the claps throughout. Thank you very much. So effectively, we've basically done the exact same thing that took us, remember, I'll just close this, the CPU took us 5 minutes and 29 seconds, okay, to do what I did in faster than real time. That's one thing that I didn't mention. It was a 30-second clip. I did it in 19 seconds in H.264. And the beauty about this, I could have done whatever I wanted. I could have created a Blu-ray file. It would have basically not taken any more overhead. It's doing all the heavy lifting. So you get the point on that there is a solution. Let's dive into what that solution really is. So let's continue here. Actually, before we continue, let me just show you for a second those three files. So right here, you'll see the church file. I have the Matrox file here, and I have the CPU file. So let me just show you. I'll get info on each for a second. I'll zoom it up so you can see it in a second. Say get info, right? And let me get info on this one. So effectively, let me zoom in. I have the three files, the original church source, the one that I used the CPU to encode, and the Matrox MAX, okay? And you'll see the original was 544 megabytes on your disk. The CPU crunched it in 5 minutes and 29 seconds.
29, yeah.
And resulted in 6 megabytes on your disk. And on the Matrox MAX, we basically used the Matrox MAX for the same resultant clip at 64360 iPod video. We did the same 30-second clip in 19 seconds. So effectively, you'll see that we did the job a lot faster, and I'll also tell you that we did it a lot.
I think it's interesting to point out the more info, like so it started at 1920 1080, and the target was an iPod, which 16 by 9 at 640/360, and you know the Apple one in the middle, the bit rate is at 1.6 megabytes a second, megabits a second, excuse me, and ours came in at 1.6 megabits, also at 640/360. So it's the same, you know, everything was the same. You know, there was no cheating.
That's right. So let me just zoom back for a second. Zoom back in. So now let's go back to our presentation here. So at this point, I showed you the solution. At the heart of the solution is the Matrox MAX technology. So what is the Matrox MAX technology? Obviously, with my demo, it's clear that it's faster than real-time H.264 encoding, ranging from iPod to HD. So in my example, I used iPod because effectively it's an easier demo to show you through a webinar. But I could easily have done an HD clip. But I think you get the point, and the wow factor is definitely still there. Specialized, dedicated hardware processing. Now this is key because of the fact that I have a dedicated horsepower to do just the heavy lifting. And it basically liberates your system resources. So imagine, you know, if you're not using the MAX technology, you're actually dedicating your primary tool for your craft, your PC, Mac, whatever. You've basically locked that primary tool to do that crunching. You can't do anything else. Sure, some of you have, you know, probably are going to go out and say, you know, but I could launch an H.264 encoding session while I'm doing editing. Sure, you can, but effectively, the second you do that, now your system resources are shared, and you're doing the crunching a lot slower. So those numbers that I showed you were basically just when you dedicate your system to do that. If you don't, and you try to share it between the editing process and the delivery process, you're just going to be wasting a lot more time. So that's the key behind the Matrox MAX technology. And one of the things that should be leaping out at you is that it is the highest quality without compromise. Because remember in the Gene commercial example I gave you earlier, a lot of you might have been willing or rushing to say, you know what, let me just deliver this quickly. It doesn't really matter what the quality is. Well, it's a compromise that you probably are ready to make, but your customer will never make you live that down. So with the Matrox MAX, you don't have to sacrifice quality for speed, okay? Because ultimately, we've heard this time and time again, and I don't want to put another cliche out there, but time is money, especially to a creative professional such as ourselves. You know, and if we're using Apple Compressor with those numbers that I showed you before, imagine what you could do with the Matrox MAX. The results on that 20-minute ProRes clip, an iPod video to be produced from this 20-minute H.264 ProRes 422 high-quality project, you do it in faster than real time. You do it in 11 minutes. Flash is under 10 minutes. And Blu-ray is 18 minutes. You do it faster than real time. So, you know, why should you care? Well, fundamentally, imagine what you can do with the rest of the time that you're wasting. You can use your system to either bill for more projects, start another project, or deliver to other medium. Remember the 3 screens I talked to you about. You're not only delivering to iPod, Flash, or Blu-ray, or web, you're basically doing all of them. And you could bill for that. And that means you can recapture the time that you've been trained to waste and capitalize on it. If Telestream was your tool of choice for compression, these are the results that you can basically achieve. Again, the key here is they're all faster than real time. With Max, you can fill up your time by billing and making more efficient use of your time. Adobe Media Encoder on that laptop, same kind of results. In fact, you're going through recapturing your time and being able to actually bill for it. So effectively, I think that the Max solution and the benefits behind the Max is, I think, well understood and well appreciated. Now, let's be more productive. Let's regain our time. And with Matrox MAX, you can actually deliver 500% more content. And why am I confident in saying that is because of the fact that, on average, we are 500% faster in encoding than using your system resources alone. So you could deliver more content in that time, regain, become more productive, you know. And, you know, it's a lot of you are thinking, sure, speed is great, but really, what is speed without quality? We could all go to McDonald's and get a quick meal, but the quality might be lacking. Imagine you could get what you really want at the same time, you know. A nice meal at the same time you can get a Big Mac and fries and maybe even supersize it for you, Wayne. But, you know, really, it's all about quality. And here I want to really show you one of the posts that our Matrox MAX Technology got on the Los Angeles Final Cut Pro user group. I want you to focus really on these 2 images. And I hope it could come across that if you take a look at what you're able to do with Compressor alone, you're losing a lot of details. And this is evident in the grass, here to here. There's a lot of differences. And also in details on the shirt. Take a look at the folds on this gentleman's shirt and even the jeans down here. You really don't get the amount of detail properly. And again, it's basically all about how you want to be judged. So a lot of our peers, a lot of your colleagues out there have looked at the Matrox MAX technology and talked about how it actually benefited them. Go to the cow. I encourage you, take a look at the H.264 encoding and see just how Matrox is actually addressing this with the Matrox MAX technology. These are great quotes we got just to kind of prove that your colleagues and peers are paying attention to the technology because it's relevant and it's feeding or filling a very significant hole in our industry. Okay. Now, Matrox MAX technology, once we announced that last year,
last NAB,
yeah. And you know we got rave reviews as I just showed you, but we're just about to do our next big improvement, which is Matrox MAX 2.0. And fundamentally, it's because of the feedback we're getting from the field, understanding where they're going with the trends. And it's all about, Matrox MAX 2.0 is all about making video better for the web, fundamentally. And what we've done is we've given you more controls. Whether, you know, the settings for variable bitrate or constant bitrate, we've given you more controls so you can tweak all you want. And the beauty about Matrox, you can tweak get the result immediately, take a look, without basically wasting a night, a day before you can see, well, the results of your tweak. Okay, so we've given you more controls. We've made it even smarter, especially for the web when you're actually delivering a low bit rate video. Scene detection is key, because you can imagine what happens during a cut. From one frame to the next, you have two dramatically different frames or images, and that really results in two very different frames. A lot of information needs to be stored because of the example I gave you earlier in terms of the IBP encoding. It's very different, so you have to really crunch that. So what we've done is we've actually made sure that we improve that so you can do away with the blockiness during the cut and actually do a scene detection.
Which is basically multi-pass encoding in a single pass.
Exactly. We do the multi-pass quality in a single pass.
Yeah.
So, and one other thing is we've added noise filter. So a lot of the times you see, whether it be from your fault due to poor lighting conditions, or maybe the camera you were forced to use wasn't as high quality, the video itself had some noise. Well, we've added a noise filter so you can do some hardware pre-processing before you start crunching the H.264 file itself. Okay, so the Matrox MAX 2.0 technology adds a whole lot more benefits to actually the Matrox MAX technology. Okay, why should you care? Well, why should you care about these improvements is because obviously from the results of the poll, a lot of you are actually publishing to the web. And when you're publishing to the web, there's a few things that you have in mind, whether it be the pipe. So how do I get the information from me to my customer? What pipe is there between us? Are we restricted in bandwidth? Well, if you are, that's where the controls of constant bitrate we give you. So you set your bitrate to about 1 megabit per second, and you see with the squiggly line that while you're going over the video in time, encoding the video in time, you don't deviate too much from that encoding or target bitrate. Okay, so that's going to ensure that because the pipe is primarily the main focus, you're not going to exceed that. What that also means is, unfortunately, that if you have a very, very difficult part of the video, well, you're not going to encode it more than 1 megabyte per second. So effectively, that is the key of the constant bitrate. The other thing that might be of interest to you is maybe the pipe is not that important. It would be the quality or the size. You want to make sure that you're judged properly, and maybe the video shouldn't be all that heavy, but you want the quality to be pristine. That's why we've given you the controls you need for the variable bitrate. This is where you set your average bitrate. It could be anything from 1 megabit per second, 3 megabit. It's up to you. We'll show you in a second. But fundamentally, it allows you to actually encode the video when it becomes very, very difficult. In this section here, you actually sample it at a higher bitrate. And let's say you have a black frame in your video and it's very simple. Well, that's where you would basically dial down the bitrate. So the average bitrate would be maintained, but you're actually getting the quality where you need it. That's the point about the variable bitrate. Okay? So fundamentally, it's all about how you're going to be judged. Time, quality, we talked about those pains, but ultimately, when you're delivering your project, you want to be judged on the quality of your work, the story that you're telling. So what I want to point to you at this point is, in fact, I want you to look at this. If this was, you take a look at the video from left and the right, they pretty much look the same because you've used pretty much the same settings on the video. The second you've added the graphic, for whatever reason, the graphic looks a little more distorted. Well, if this was an ad that you were doing for Coca-Cola, I'll tell you that the Coca-Cola executives would be extremely angry at the fact that the video might look great, but the logo looks blocky. The other thing I want you to point to this attention is the fact that the red is not the same red. This is something that I want you to pay attention to because, for example, in Compressor, there is a gamma shift problem. If you're using Compressor to encode your H.264 files, you'll see that your colors are not well maintained, and that's because of a gamma shift. You'll see here on this side, on the right side, Matrox MAX is used, and you'll have the red that's in fact the red that started with your source file. Okay. I want to show you the advantages that we added in Matrox MAX 2.0 for a second. So let me go there and show you exactly what I'm talking about. So if you take a look at, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. Zoom in here. There is the settings here, and you can go into the inspector window. I'll just zoom in and give the screen a second to catch up with what I'm doing. And you can take a look at the encoding settings, okay? And at this point, there's options. Because I have Matrox MAX encoded or attached, I'll give it a second to catch up. And I'll give you the options. So let me just click on the options for a second, so you'll see what the Matrox MAX gives you. It gives you this beautiful window that we pop up, and you'll see our logo in the background. You'll know that that's our tool. And all of these settings, you know, are there for the compressionist that really wants to make sure that the quality is something that is paramount to anything else. And all of these beautiful hardware settings that we gave you, you know, we take a look. These are standard settings. You set your level, frame size, aspect ratio. You can do your frame rate. But let me focus on what we've given you in 2.0. You'll see here we have a check here where it's hardware scaling or not. Effectively, hardware scaling, for example, if your source was a 1080i source and you want to publish it for the web, you'll check this deinterlace video to make it a progressive video so it looks as pristine as possible on the web. The other thing you'll notice here is the noise filter and the scene detection. By default, these are set to none and off because we want you to basically decide when to use noise filter, because sometimes if you don't really need the noise filter on, you might be softening your video unnecessarily. So we give you the choice of adjusting the noise filter or not. The scene detection again. Now on this side of the page, I'd like to focus on the cab act. You set your profile, whether it be for Blu-ray or mobile devices, and these are the three things we're talking about. So these are the settings that we really go into and give you the tweakability, if that's even a word, you know, to help you fool around. So if your pipe was important to you and you want to go to the constant data rate, you basically would click on that. This is where you would set your target data rate here at 1.5, or you could set it at more realistic. Let me put that at 1, for example. And you know, you basically set that, and that's your target, and that's where you're going to be hovering very close to. We also give you a setting here, which is a sample rate, and that basically is like a watchdog. That basically either you can set it at low or high, or frequent or less frequent. And what that means is a sample rate at low means that your watchdog is checking your encoding process not that often, but checking to see that you're not deviating too far away from your target data rate. And the high is basically your high setting is to make sure that you can do that very often, so that you know you can actually set it and check it on a very regular basis. The data rate adjustments that you see here, from gradual to quick, that is basically a setting that allows you to decide, if I do deviate from my constant data rate selection from 1 megabit per second, what do? If I set it to gradual, it will smoothly come down to 1 megabyte per second. If I do it to quick, the second I check that, it will come down as a staircase saying, oh no, I'm at 1.5, well, let me just come down, the next frame come down to 1 megabyte. So you have a setting there that you can adjust, all right? Effectively then, you can go to variable bitrate, and we give you a lot more settings there. Again, you can set your target bitrate at 1 megabyte per second or whatever you want. Say I put it at 5. You'll notice that these images, excuse me, I'm getting some feedback that the video is not, or what I'm trying to, okay, so it's coming up now. So I put it at 5. You can basically see that we've done some intelligence in the variable bitrate that we send, you know, you can set your, variable means you set a threshold. Don't go below this sample rate, don't go above this sample rate, and my target data rate or average should be, in this case, I've set it to 5. So here you'll see that the lowest or minimum data rate is set to 1.2 and it's 5. And you'll see this little lock here. It's automatic. Basically, it's automatically calculating that for you. For example, if I would change that to 3, you see that those settings are changing. The minimum is changing to 750. Let me just make sure you can see that. And the top is 3. Now, if I unlock that, I can fool around with it anywhere I want. I can set that to, minimum data rate of 210 if you want, or you can fool around with it. But fundamentally, this is all the tweakability that we give you. You can set, depending on how complex your video is, and the same here at the bottom, you'll see the same settings of the constant bitrate, low, and data adjustment. And constant quality, this is for, compression for, I don't want to say this, but compression for dummies. Setting your, there's no real lowest quality or best quality. You set it to where you like it, and basically it's always going to maintain that quality. It gives you no more tweakability than that. So that's basically what I wanted to show you. I don't want to go too long. I'll come back to the presentation and wrap it up. So I know that there's a lot of questions here. So I've shown you the tweakability. So fundamentally, encoding H.264, there's a lot of hurdles. Today we talked about the main hurdle of encoding time. We also talked about quality, in terms of trying to get the best quality without waiting an eternity, because it's brutal to encode H.264. And fundamentally, a lot of it has to do with, if you find something that can encode it very fast and do it very high quality. The third point, it was very expensive. Well, with the Matrox MAX, it's not. We introduced the first place you can taste the Matrox MAX is a Compress HD. Because I'm sure that all of you heard, in the beginning of the presentation, that I'm an I/O manufacturer. And, I get this feedback a lot. People are saying, well, I bet this guy's going to want me to get an I/O device and with Max on it. No, we're conscious of the fact that you probably already invested in an I/O device. And we still want you to have an ability to inject this steroid in your system. So that's why we enabled you to taste the Matrox MAX technology in a Compress HD. Effectively, it's a low-profile card. It's a half-length card, PCIe by 1, and it works in systems with or without an I/O device. In fact, if it even has an I/O device that's not Matrox, it'll work just the same. And it is also for Mac and PC, so it's for all of you on the line at this point. Now, it's the only product in its class that has direct integration within Compressor and Media Encoder. What I mean by that is you don't have to learn another tool. If Compressor was the tool, and our respondents of our poll show that 47% of the people were using 45% were using Compressor, and 35 were using Media Encoder, you don't have to go use another tool. We basically just fold in. It's as easy as asking to use this steroid or not if it's in your system. And it's faster than real-time H.264 encoding. And it's really the only professional device out there that gives you the quality and speed you need. Where else you can get the Compress HD for all of our attendees on the line that aren't from the US is $495 US. So, talking about the pain points of the hurdles, quality, speed, and price, you can see that the accessibility of this product is such that everyone could taste Max. Where else can you get Max? Well, Max is also, if you don't have an I/O device, we've put it into versions of our I/O devices so you can purchase the MX02 with Max, our rack with Max, our Mini with Max, and our MX02 LE with Max. And a lot of people have also asked us, registering for the webinar, is what if I had an MX02 without Max? Can I upgrade it? No, you cannot upgrade it because the see up on screen right now are built with the H.264 encoding technology in there. And there's no way to add it if you have one without it. But what you can do is, if you have working on a desktop, you can add the Compress HD to your system that you're using, the MX02 or rack or Mini or LE as an I/O device. You can add the Compress HD so it could be the way you taste Max. Okay, so I've taken a lot of your time. I hope this was very informative. And before we go into Q&A, I am going to just ask you one last question before you ask away. Did this seminar, in fact, give you a better understanding of H.264? Was it informative? I'm going to wait for the majority of the people. Wow, these are really great results. Thanks, guys. I'm hitting 90%. This is fantastic. Wow. Well, I'll show you in a second, but let me broadcast the results. I'm a little giddy here, Wayne. Check this out. So clearly, this means that it is a very important and relevant topic. And for those of you on the line hearing this, this is basically something that Matrox will continue taking a leadership role in because of the fact that we have our ear very close to the market, and we know that this is what you've been asking for. So let me just close the poll for a second and just show you, broadcast the results. 86% of you thought that this was informative. So I'll thank you once again. I really appreciate the feedback, guys.